And your book is phenomenal. It's just flat out
Thank
phenomenal.
you.
And I was talking about this from the perspective of what's happening down in Memphis with this AI center through X. And I'm not sure how much you're familiar with it, but it is a perfect example of companies profit over and taking advantage of communities that have lower income or lower resources, however we want to frame
Mhm.
it, and just dropping an AI center in there with these loud A turbine engines. I don't know how much you've heard about it, but this is a great example
Yeah.
about, you know, corporations just saying, you know what, we don't care. We're going to go get ours. And if it ends up hurting people in a community, we really don't care. We've got the money to fight any of the suits that come our way. Talk a little bit about your observations about that, but also the broader part of your book.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right, Richard. I mean, corporations are taking advantage of opportunities where they can to go into the most vulnerable communities. And, my book is about how they're especially doing that by exploiting government programs that are intended to help these very communities, right? And we can talk about this, but it's gotten a lot worse under the Trump administration because this president has done his best to monetize the presidency in every way, but he's also provided plenty of opportunities for companies to do the same thing. I give an example here of ICE detention centers. Detention centers are mostly run by a couple companies, one being the GEO Group. And you've heard about all these horrific abuses that are happening in these privatized detention centers. But that's been going on for decades with privatized prisons, taking advantage of federal and state money to basically carry out mass incarceration of folks, and now detention, and now immigrants. Tax prep companies that colonize in low-income neighborhoods, um, dollar stores that are colonizing neighborhoods and not providing fresh fruits and vegetables. There's so many instances of kind of corporate colonization of communities, and providing substandard services, taking government money, and then turning around and exploiting the communities that are the most vulnerable.
Can you
And
explain?
as you,
Can you explain a little
yeah,
bit
go
more
ahead.
about corporate colonization, and then keep going? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to back up a little bit, the federal government spends nearly $1 trillion every year on programs that either, directly impact low-income folks or disproportionately impact people who are in low-income communities. And a lot of that is healthcare. And we can talk about Medicaid dentists and providers that specialize in providing care to people who are on Medicaid, often at substandard levels, right? But for every program, there is a cottage industry of companies that have made it their business to extract as much of the money as possible from these programs without necessarily providing the benefits to low-income people that they're supposed to do. Like landlords that specialize in Section 8 housing, for instance, and provide really substandard um, places for people to live, places without the right, maintenance or um, infestations of, you know, various. It just goes on and on. I talk about that in the book, and it's happened because of the company's ability to lobby for breaks in the legislatures to make that happen. Prisons being a great example of that, and detention centers being a great example of that. Complexity in government programs, and then third, this belief propagated by Ronald Reagan, but conservatives generally, that business can do better than government, and that is just simply not true. That is just simply not true. We have taken away so much ability from uh, state workers and government workers to actually decide whether someone is entitled to benefits and how much they get, and given that to for-profit contractors who are making these life and death decisions on behalf of people. And you can see over and over and over again, whether it's healthcare, denial of care. In Texas, the entire welfare system is run by a contractor. You wouldn't know it if you call them up, but it's the case that a company called Maximus is deciding whether people who there are entitled to welfare benefits, entitled to health care, entitled to SNAP. Should those decisions be in the hands of private companies? I think a lot of people would say not if they knew.
No, most people would say that you're exactly right. And the crazy thing about this company, Maximus, is that they haven't really been investigated to my satisfaction. And that, not that that
Right.
means a damn thing, but to the point to say that they approving and allocating the benefits appropriately and to the people that need them the most. And this is where racism and familial status comes into play, because from what I've read, they really kind of walk the fine line of if a family is of a certain ethnicity, or if the family is not one that has the makeup that the private corporation behind closed doors thinks it should, those benefits are going in other directions. And that to me is a huge problem when you have private corporations running programs that should be run by, a well-run government organization. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, when you delegate state power to a company, all of whatever biases a company might hold or its workers might hold are going to come into play. And this privatization, this corporate colonization, I think is a big part of a lot of systemic racism, systemic problems we're seeing in communities all across the country. People are frustrated that anti-poverty programs don't seem to work, but you know what? These companies have a vested interest in seeing poverty remain entrenched because that is their business model,
Yep.
right? Their client base, so to speak, their customer base is impoverished people and the government programs that are intended to help them. So they're kind of working in the shadows. I mean, you make that point that these companies have not been properly investigated. And that's because they hide.
Yep.
States don't make a big deal out of telling people, oh, hey, we're not actually making decisions on your behalf or contracting into a private contractor who may or may not have your best interests at heart. But it's very much in their interest to stay out of the shadows. How many people have heard of Maximus? It's a multi-billion-dollar company, but
Yep.
very few people have heard of them.
And the crazy thing about it, and we're going to go to a quick break, and is that in the states where these private companies are running programs that should be run by the state or a federal agency, what's also happening is in the contracts that they write, that are written, that they sign with the government entity, it's basically built in, kind of going back to the old Bush days, that you can't sue them or challenge their decision, because the federal government or the state government has given them this sort of off ramp that their decisions can't be challenged. And it's just a weird cycle, of protecting these private corporations from any sort of jurisdictional influence. So it's a crazy cycle.
Yeah.
And let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more, a little bit about the book, but also how we can kind of bend the arc a little bit when it comes to moving this conversation in a better direction for folks that are in these poverty communities. The number is 773-763-9278. I'm Richard Chu. Keep it locked in. We'll be right back with more of Chu's Views. All right, guys, welcome back to Chu's Views. If you are just tuning in, I'm Richard Chu. Thanks for being with us. Today, we are talking right now with Ann Kim, who is the author. She's senior editor at the Washington Monthly, which I love. And she is a public policy expert. And most recently, her book, Poverty Over Profit, which we were talking about before the break. And I want to ask you a question. I made a statement. I've made this statement a bunch of times. It's like I made it once, but I've said this a number of times, that businesses in the long run are going to hurt themselves by not leaning in the direction of the consumer, not leaning in the direction of people who actually spend money, given that we are a consumer-driven economy. If you lean in the direction too long of those like you, meaning other businesses or politicians like Trump and the administration, that's going to run out at some point. I believe. I could be crazy. But you wrote this great article entitled "Businesses Should Step Up to Defend Democracy." Talk about the genesis of that, and then where you kind of see things now.
Yeah, so that article was based on an interview with a tremendous leader named Verena Winder, who is the founder of an organization called Leadership Now. And they're a small organization, but they're organizing businesses that really support the idea that democracy is central to a healthy business environment. What they argue is that you can't have a despotic system where only a few people at the top are profiting, because that means that 99% of businesses that aren't, within the inner confines of the Trump circle or whatever are going to do well. So it's to everyone's benefit to have free competition. And it's exactly to your point, Richard. In the long run, the businesses that are cozying up to this administration or to any administration that's offering special benefits, they're not going to benefit in the long run, because people see that, people know, and they're getting their advantages not based upon the merit of their product, but because of these special favors. That's not a sustainable situation.
No, and I go back to something that I said for the longest time about the playing field being level. The reason, one of the major reasons I should say, that the playing field should be level is because at some point it will be out of balance, and we're at that point. I said last April, May, that we're not teetering toward authoritarianism. We're already there. We're not teetering toward an imbalance in our economy and oligarchs. They've already done that, and it's going to reach a point that the imbalance is going to could cause those businesses to cave in on themselves. Because at some point, I think that the American community will say, and some are saying it now based on who they're voting for in these special elections and these primaries, I'm done with this garbage. And you guys are eventually going to listen, and that's why we have these protests. I think that's why we have some of these boycotts. What are your thoughts there, Ann?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And getting back to your point about the data centers, that is why this backlash is happening, right? I mean, these companies have too much power, and it's undeserved. People see that. Yeah, and that's what people are reacting to. I mean, we in America, we really cherish this idea of level playing field, as you're saying, and competition. But, when people are getting ahead because they're taking advantage of special contacts or the fact that they've contributed to a ballroom or something like that, that really gets to people's fundamental sense of fairness, or rather unfairness, about this economy. And we're seeing that backlash, and I think you're absolutely right. It's coming, and we're going to see it hopefully big in November, and that will help level the playing field going forward.
So tell us some of the responses that you've gotten from not only readers, but the business community at large when it comes to your book, because it's an expose is a word that comes to mind every time I look at it. It's an expose of things that a lot of people don't want to talk about when it comes to what corporations have been doing for a long time. And I give a kind of a date stamp of Ronald Reagan in my lifetime, my adult lifetime, is that he changed the narrative. He literally changed the laws, or allowed the laws to be changed. And we've been on this path for a long, long time. What are people saying to you when you talk to folks about the book, or when people talk to you about the book?
Yeah, people are pretty surprised, I would say, because so much of this has happened over a 40, 50-year period, right? Since Ronald Reagan, who started the privatization train. And I have to say, Bill Clinton completed it,
Yeah.
with welfare reform. What he did was he allowed private companies to run welfare programs. Before the welfare reform of 1996, private companies could not actually do this. But, that enabled the companies that we've talked about to really explode in terms of their revenue. Um, and so, and then the complexity with the tax code too, like the earned income tax credit. The tax prep companies exploded after the expansion of the earned income tax credit that also happened during Clinton. So this is a bipartisan problem. People see it. What I think I'm hearing now is that there's a lot of despair
Yeah.
at the moment about how to unwind all this, because it has been a 40, 50-year process. And the awareness is just the first step. Unwinding not only the clawback of power, but changing how we think about who is poor in America and why.
Hmm.
That is the biggest challenge I think that we face, because ever since the founding of the country, it's always been about the quote unquote deserving poor. And as we've talked about, Richard, that's super racialized,
Yeah.
based on all sorts of perceptions and false stereotypes. How do you change the narrative about why people are poor? Because of systemic barriers that they face, and not because of who they are. And this administration has done so much to continue to blame the victims of poverty for being poor because of who they are.
Hmm.
We've got decades of work ahead of us to get back to where we were, even in, 2020,
Yeah.
because of what this administration has done. So uh, people are beginning to understand, but it feels like it's going to be very difficult to turn things around so long as we have the administration that we have, and so long as we have this very us versus them mentality that's just making it very difficult to find progress on these big issues that are confronting us.
What do you think about? I mean, there's the contributing factors have been bipartisan, or there have been presidents and administrations that have leaned in this direction and created a problem or furthered the problem. So, as we wrap up, and there's so much more to talk about, we got to have you back on again soon because I want to talk more about this as we're getting closer to the midterm election. But what do you think that it's the solution or the move in the direction of a solution is going to be going to have to be partisan, i.e., the next administration and the next leaders on the state level are going to have to be partisan in this and not be worried about working across the aisle, because sometimes that gets us in trouble because it takes too much doggone time.
I know this is a really hard question, Richard. On the one hand,
Sorry.
on the one hand, you it feels like it's got to be partisan in order to get something done. On the other hand, is it going to be a lasting achievement if it's not bipartisan? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I do.
When you look back, yeah, it's Civil Rights Act, all of those things, those are bipartisan. The one big beautiful bill, I hope, will not last because it was so partisan.
Right.
So there's that trade-off, between pragmatism versus, a sustainable achievement. Tough question. Tough question.
And I think, well, I like the way that you responded to that because it's kind of where my brain is too. Some of the stuff that we got into with the goal being that we want to include everybody because it's kind of the statement that, so much of the progressive liberal democratic mindset has is we want to include as many voices as possible. But I think every now and again, you just have to draw the line and say, no, that's not going to work, or that's not what we're interested in, because it actually doesn't help as many people as you might think it is. And trying to be bipartisan sometimes gets us into trouble because we can't make a decision that we know that the majority of Americans are going to lean in the direction of supporting. So I think it's going to take a little bit of partisanship right now to get the truck out of the ditch, so to speak. And
Yeah.
real quickly, how can folks find you as we wrap up today?
Yeah, I'm at Washington Monthly, WashingtonMonthly.com, both and on Substack. Look for Washington Monthly there. And I have my own site, AnnSKim.com. And the books are available on Amazon. So really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Absolutely. We got to give some books away. We have to talk about that offline. We got to give some of your books away. Ann Kim, y'all, go check her out. Senior editor at Washington Monthly and author of the best-selling book, Poverty Over Profit, How Corporations Get Rich Off of America's Poor. Ann, thanks for being with us this morning. We will talk to you soon, okay?
Thank you, Richard.
All right.
Appreciate it.
You too. Bye-bye now.